They arrive cloaked in righteousness, the self-proclaimed saviors of the suffering, NGOs. Their names are synonymous with hope in landscapes scarred by despair. But is this the whole story? What if behind the veneer of humanitarianism, a different, more disturbing agenda lurks? This is a journey into the dark heart of a possibility that could shatter your perception of global aid. Across the African continent, from the Sahel to the Horn, a dramatic shift is underway. Governments are making bold, controversial decisions. They are showing foreign NGOs the door. Look at Burkina Faso. Consider Sudan. Why this sudden coordinated pushback? These governments are leveling explosive accusations. They claim these international aid groups are not merely innocent providers of relief. Far from it. They allege that some NGOs are actively fueling rebellions, acting as conduits for illicit money, and deliberately, strategically, prolonging the very conflicts they are supposed to be mitigating. These are not minor grievances, these are charges of profound betrayal. So who is really pulling the strings in this complex, high-stakes game? Is it the dedicated, often courageous aid worker on the ground, risking their life daily for what they believe is a noble cause? Or are there other, less visible forces at play, operating from the shadows, manipulating events to serve hidden agendas that have little to do with humanitarian relief? The official brochures and heartfelt appeals tell one story, but the increasingly drastic actions of sovereign African governments, the leaked documents, the hushed testimony of insiders, they all point towards a vastly different, far more troubling reality. A reality where aid itself might be weaponized. The paradox is stark, almost unbelievable. NGOs, non-governmental organizations, are, by their very definition, supposed to be the good guys. Their mission statements overflow with commitments to provide food to the starving, medicine to the sick, shelter to the homeless, and support in times of dire crisis. This is their publicized mandate. This is what drives the millions in donations from well-meaning people across the globe. They are presented as neutral, impartial entities, guided solely by lofty humanitarian principles. Yet, in Africa's most lethal war zones, a disturbing counter-narrative is rapidly gaining traction, a narrative that is incredibly difficult to reconcile with this pristine public image. The accusations are not vague, they are chillingly specific and deeply damning, arming rebel factions. This isn't some abstract allegation of indirect support. This is a direct claim, made by national governments, that organizations dedicated to preserving life are in fact supplying the means to take it. Think about the profound implications of such an act. It transforms these groups from saviors into instigators, from peace builders into protagonists of war. It suggests that some elements within the vast NGO network might actually benefit from the continuation of chaos, rather than its definitive, lasting resolution. Is this the uncomfortable, unspoken truth we've been missing? The list of countries where NGOs are facing intense scrutiny and even expulsion is growing. Sudan, Burkina Faso, Niger, Ethiopia, Mali. These are not isolated incidents. This represents a clear, discernible pattern. A rising tide of suspicion and distrust is sweeping across the African continent. In Sudan, NGOs face accusations of arming rebel groups. These allegations demand rigorous investigation. The stakes are incredibly high. Why are so many African governments turning their backs on these aid organizations? The reasons cited are consistent and deeply troubling. The funding of rebel groups is a recurring theme. Cash and supplies meant for aid are allegedly being diverted to militants. This isn't just poor oversight. If substantiated, it points to active complicity. There's also the charge of espionage. Some NGOs are accused of profiting from war. No war means no dramatic headlines. No headlines mean fewer donations. Fewer donations mean smaller budgets and a diminished presence. Continued instability ensures robust funding streams. Critics argue this creates a perverse incentive structure. This is more than logistical challenges or misunderstandings. We are witnessing a fundamental breakdown of trust. Why else would African leaders expel these groups? They are risking international condemnation. They are potentially foregoing millions in vital aid. There must be compelling reasons behind these actions. NGOs, non-governmental organizations. The name itself projects an air of independence, of integrity. It suggests a clean break from the grubby world of politics and state-sponsored agendas. They are presented as the neutral parties, the honest brokers, operating above the fray, untouched by the cynical power plays that fuel so much global conflict. This image of impartiality is their calling card, their shield, their most valuable asset. But what does this label truly signify when the rubber meets the road in the heart of chaos? Does it truly mean they are free from influence, or is that just a convenient fiction? Their mission statements echo with noble declarations, a symphony of humanitarian concern. They pledge to deliver food to the starving, to provide shelter to those driven from their homes, to bring medicine to the sick, the injured, the dying. They are the first to arrive when disaster strikes. They venture into the epicenters of war, into places where governments falter or simply don't care. Their logos, emblazoned on trucks and tents, are meant to be symbols of unwavering hope. This is the powerful narrative sold to a compassionate global audience, an audience eager to believe in unambiguous good. Picture the scene, often promoted in their own materials. Brave aid workers, frequently young and driven by idealism. They face immense dangers. They navigate treacherous landscapes. They negotiate access with armed groups, all supposedly in the selfless pursuit of alleviating human suffering. They are mandated to be impartial, to be neutral, to distribute aid based solely on need, without regard for politics, religion, or affiliation. Their sole loyalty, they insist, is to humanity itself. This principle is the very foundation of their legitimacy, or so we are told. This is the carefully polished story, the version that dominates headlines and inspires countless fundraising campaigns. It's the image that secures them billions of dollars in donations and grants annually. An image of pure altruism, of tireless dedication to the world's most vulnerable. But the critical question lingers, growing louder by the day. Is this meticulously crafted image the whole truth? Or is it a sophisticated public relations strategy? A mask designed to conceal a reality that is far more complex and potentially far more disturbing than we've ever been led to believe. Section 2, From Saviors to Suspects, The Disturbing Shift. Emerging from Africa's conflict zones, whispers of doubt circulate. Stories contradicting heroic portrayals become shouts. Governments accuse NGOs of meddling and spying. NGOs face serious allegations, shattering trust. Is it a misunderstanding or a troubling reality? The sheer number of alarms suggests more scrutiny. Section 3. The unsettling question, deliberate deception or deadly naivety. The central burning question boils down to intent. Are these NGOs simply naive players out of their depth in extraordinarily complex and volatile environments? Are they making catastrophic errors in judgment with devastating, albeit unintentional consequences? Is their vital aid, their precious resources, being systematically diverted and co-opted by ruthless warlords and militant groups without their full knowledge or consent? Perhaps their inherent idealism, their desire to see the best in people, blinds them to the brutal realities of cynical manipulation on the ground. This is the most charitable view, the one that offers an escape route. But what if the truth is far more sinister? What if these accusations are not merely about incompetence or gullibility? What if they point towards something far more deliberate, far more calculated? Could it be conceivable that some of these organizations, or at least powerful factions within them, actually benefit from the very chaos they are supposed to be alleviating? It's a deeply disturbing thought, one that fundamentally challenges our most cherished beliefs about humanitarian action. Yet the charge persists, that for some perpetual conflict is not a problem to be solved, but a condition to be managed for institutional gain. Follow the money. It's a well-worn piece of advice, but one that often cuts through the noise and illuminates uncomfortable truths. Non-governmental organizations, despite their name, operate with enormous budgets. These budgets are overwhelmingly fueled by public donations and substantial government grants. And what historically has been the most effective catalyst for opening wallets and securing funding? Crisis, war, famine, widespread human suffering. The more dire the situation, the more dramatic the headlines, the more readily the funds flow. If genuine peace takes root, if stability truly returns, what happens to these funding streams? This is precisely where the lines begin to blur, becoming dangerously indistinct. The line between genuine selfless altruism and the powerful instinct for organizational self-preservation. The line between providing essential, life-saving assistance and inadvertently, or perhaps even intentionally, perpetuating the very conditions that make such assistance necessary. Are some NGOs trapped in a perverse feedback loop, where their existence depends on the continuation of misery? Or more chillingly, are some actively exploiting this dynamic? The accusations are now firmly on the table, and African governments are taking decisive, often drastic action based on them. Section 3. The unsettling question, deliberate deception or deadly naivety. The central burning question boils down to intent. Are these NGOs simply naive players out of their depth in extraordinarily complex and volatile environments? Are they making catastrophic errors in judgment with devastating, albeit unintentional consequences? Is their vital aid, their precious resources, being systematically diverted and co-opted by ruthless warlords and militant groups without their full knowledge or consent? Perhaps their inherent idealism, their desire to see the best in people, blinds them to the brutal realities of cynical manipulation on the ground. This is the most charitable view, the one that offers an escape route. But what if the truth is far more sinister? What if these accusations are not merely about incompetence or gullibility? What if they point towards something far more deliberate, far more calculated? Could it be conceivable that some of these organizations, or at least powerful factions within them, actually benefit from the very chaos they are supposed to be alleviating? It's a deeply disturbing thought, one that fundamentally challenges our most cherished beliefs about humanitarian action. Yet the charge persists that for some, perpetual conflict is not a problem to be solved, but a condition to be managed for institutional gain. Follow the money. It's a well-worn piece of advice, but one that often cuts through the noise and illuminates uncomfortable truths. Non-governmental organizations, despite their name, operate with enormous budgets. These budgets are overwhelmingly fueled by public donations and substantial government grants. And what, historically, has been the most effective catalyst for opening wallets and securing funding? Crisis, war, famine, widespread human suffering. The more dire the situation, the more dramatic the headlines, the more readily the funds flow. If genuine peace takes root, if stability truly returns, what happens to these funding streams? This is precisely where the lines begin to blur, becoming dangerously indistinct. The line between genuine selfless altruism and the powerful instinct for organizational self-preservation. The line between providing essential, life-saving assistance and inadvertently, or perhaps even intentionally, perpetuating the very conditions that make such assistance necessary. Are some NGOs trapped in a perverse feedback loop, where their existence depends on the continuation of misery? Or more chillingly, are some actively exploiting this dynamic? The accusations are now firmly on the table, and African governments are taking decisive, often drastic action based on them. Section 1. The Invisible Hand. Allegations of rebel funding. African governments are now openly stating it. Some non-governmental organizations are not just passive observers, they are allegedly active financiers of rebellion. Cash, weapons, critical supplies, flowing not to the desperate victims of conflict, but directly into the hands of those who perpetrate the violence. Imagine the sheer audacity. Organizations built on global trust, now accused of directly fueling war. How could this even happen? The mechanics are deeply unsettling. Vast sums of money donated by well-meaning individuals worldwide. Supplies intended for refugee camps for starving children, allegedly diverted, siphoned off, sometimes through elaborate clandestine networks, other times perhaps through a calculated turning of a blind eye. The impact of such alleged actions is catastrophic. Rebel groups, emboldened and better equipped, can fight longer. Peace initiatives are systematically undermined. The sovereignty of nations is eroded from within. Section 2. Eyes in the Aid Convoy. Espionage under a humanitarian banner. But the accusations don't stop at funding rebels. There's another layer to this onion of suspicion. A charge that strikes at the heart of national security. Espionage. Governments across Africa are alleging it. They claim some NGOs are not what they seem. That they are operating as sophisticated fronts for Western intelligence agencies, gathering vital information under the perfect, unimpeachable cover of humanitarian work. Think about the unparalleled access these organizations possess. They operate in remote regions, often off-limits to others, deep within conflict zones, interacting with all sides. They build networks, gather data, map terrain, ostensibly for aid delivery, for understanding needs. But what if that information serves a dual purpose? The line between humanitarian intelligence and state espionage can be perilously thin. Humanitarian access becomes a covert intelligence goldmine. Section 3. The War Economy. Do NGOs thrive on chaos? Now, let's consider perhaps the most cynical accusation of all. What if some NGOs or the system they operate within actually profit from the continuation of war? It's a brutal thought, almost unthinkable. That organizations dedicated to alleviating suffering might have a vested interest in that suffering never truly ending. No war means no dramatic, heart-wrenching headlines. No headlines mean a sharp decline in public donations. No donations mean shrinking budgets, job losses, diminished influence. The humanitarian aid sector is a multi-billion-dollar global industry. Let that sink in. An industry. And like any industry, it has its own economic drivers, its own imperatives. Vast sums of money flow through these organizations annually. Careers are built. Livelihoods depend on sustained operations. Competition for funding, for grants from Western governments is fierce. And what unlocks those funding streams most effectively? Crisis, disaster. Section 4. The leaked truth, whispers from the shadows. Then there are the leaks, the whispers that turn into shouts, damaging documents, internal memos, whistleblower testimonies, suddenly appearing in the public domain, often anonymously, painting a picture starkly different from the glossy brochures. Remember that chilling phrase from the hypothetical leaked memo? Continued instability ensures funding streams. Imagine such a sentiment not as a wild accusation but as an actual internal guiding principle for some. This is the kind of revelation that ignites government suspicion, transforming vague doubts into concrete fears of manipulation. These leaks, whether verified or not, have a powerful impact. They suggest a cold, cynical calculus behind the humanitarian mask. A deliberate strategy to manage rather than resolve crises. They hint at a world where human suffering is a commodity, a resource to be leveraged for organizational survival and growth, internal communications that discuss donor fatigue, or the need for compelling narratives to secure next year's budget. Suddenly, the desperate pleas for help can sound very different. Not just as altruism, but as carefully crafted marketing, the disconnect between public saintliness and private strategy. The dam of diplomatic patience has finally burst. Across the vast African continent, a new steely resolve is hardening. Governments are no longer content to merely whisper their grave suspicions. They are taking action, decisive, uncompromising. The era of largely unchecked NGO operations in volatile conflict zones, it appears to be facing an abrupt and for some, a brutal reckoning. The doors are not just closing, they are being slammed shut, bolted. Access, once granted with perceived impunity, is now stringently denied. A chilling message is being sent. The old ways are over. This is no scattered series of isolated incidents. Far from it. Observe the trend. It is a clear, discernible pattern. A calculated, continent-wide response to years, even decades, of alleged overreach. To what many African leaders now see as direct threats against their national sovereignty. The accusations, once muted, are now a deafening chorus, meddling in internal politics. Enter Nigeria, Africa's demographic and economic titan, now positioned at the volatile forefront of this NGO crackdown, their patience demonstrably exhausted, their official accusations cold and chilling, terror financing. Let those two words sink deep into your consciousness. This is not an allegation of mismanagement, not a critique of operational inefficiency. This is a direct charge of actively, perhaps deliberately funding terror. The gauntlet has been thrown down with undeniable force. The stakes for all involved could scarcely be higher. A red line has been crossed and there may be no turning back. The Nigerian landscape is tragically scarred by protracted insurgency. Boko Haram's brutal reign of terror has left indelible wounds. Banditry and other forms of violent extremism are rampant. For years, the nation has been locked in a desperate battle for its very soul. And now, the Nigerian government points an accusatory finger at certain non-governmental organizations operating within its borders, claiming they are not the neutral, benevolent saviors they purport to be. Shift your gaze to West Africa, to the heart of the Sahel, a region that has become ground zero for escalating instability. And there, Burkina Faso, caught directly in the eye of this raging storm, a nation grappling with recurrent military coups, with relentlessly spreading jihadist violence, and now with a determined systematic purge of non-governmental organizations, specifically those with prominent French connections. The symbolism of this move is undeniably potent. The geopolitical implications are profound, rippling far beyond its borders. This represents a clear, unambiguous break from a contentious past. The specific political context here is absolutely crucial to understanding these actions. Military juntas have seized power, often fueled by popular discontent. A powerful wave of anti-French sentiment is sweeping through the region. There's a palpable, urgent desire to sever lingering colonial-era ties. These newly empowered military leaders are inherently suspicious of any organization perceived as an extension of foreign, particularly French, influence. NGOs, especially those with historical links to Paris, become conspicuous targets. Are they convenient scapegoats for complex internal problems? Section 4. Sudan's agony, caught between blockades and bullets. Now, turn to Sudan, a nation tragically torn asunder. Ripped apart by a brutal civil war. Millions displaced, starvation looms. The government blocks aid, citing security concerns. Accusations of weaponized aid and exploitation of humanitarian corridors arise. The international community demands access, but the government remains steadfast. Innocent civilians, especially women and children, are trapped in this deadly geopolitical game. Decoding donor agendas. Where does the money for these angels of mercy come from? You might imagine bake sales and heartfelt appeals, pennies from heaven, but the reality? It's far more complex, far more compromised. A significant chunk of NGO funding flows from Western governments. Think USAID, the UK Foreign Office, various European ministries of development. These are not neutral piggy banks. They are instruments of national strategy. Humanitarian aid often comes with invisible strings attached. Let's zoom in on USAID. Billions flow through this behemoth yearly. Its mission? To end extreme global poverty. Sounds noble, doesn't it? Yet, USAID has been linked to the CIA, whispers of intelligence gathering, shaping political landscapes to align with American objectives. Is it purely development, or influence peddling? The UK's FCDO plays a similar game, as do other European aid departments. Many have brutal colonial histories in Africa, so a healthy dose of suspicion is warranted. Pay close attention to where their money goes. You'll find a startling alignment between humanitarian priorities and economic interests. Coincidence, or calibrated policy? NGOs risk becoming extensions of state power, steered to promote favorable policies. The concept of non-governmental feels like a misnomer. This isn't just about financial aid dependency. Agendas are set far from African capitals. The hand that gives also guides or shoves. Democracy promotion by Western powers sounds noble, but whose democracy? Often it's a Western-centric model, ill-suited to African realities, aligning with strategic interests. Friendly autocrats get a free pass, while unfriendly regimes face aggressive democracy promotion. This can destabilize nations, exacerbate divisions, and breed resentment. And then there's the name that sends shivers down the spines of nationalist leaders and conspiracy theorists alike, George Soros. His Open Society Foundations, or OSF, represent a colossal force in the world of international philanthropy, a sprawling global network with an annual budget that dwarfs the GDP of some smaller nations. Their mission? To build vibrant and tolerant democracies, to promote justice, education, public health, and independent media. Lofty goals, undoubtedly. But the OSF and Soros himself are magnets for intense controversy. Accused of being far more than just disinterested charitable givers. The accusations are relentless, that the Open Society Foundations and other similar mega-foundations operate as quasi-autonomous foreign policy actors, that they aggressively push a very particular liberal globalist agenda, often irrespective of local contexts or desires, that they use their vast financial leverage to reshape political and social landscapes from the outside in. Critics allege that OSF funding is routinely channeled to protest movements, activist groups, and media organizations that actively seek to destabilize governments deemed ideologically unaligned. Is this philanthropy? Or is it sophisticated high-stakes political engineering, operating under the benevolent guise of charity? The questions hang heavy in the air. This is where the hidden hands argument gains serious traction. Unlike government aid agencies, which are at least nominally accountable to taxpayers and elected officials, these private foundations can operate with significantly less transparency, with far fewer checks and balances. This perceived lack of oversight allows them, critics charge, to engage in more overtly political, more controversial activities that government agencies might shy away from, at least publicly. They can fund the fringes, they can support the radicals, they can quietly build networks of influence that penetrate deep into the fabric of a target nation's society, all while maintaining a public facade of impartial benevolence. Naturally, the Open Society Foundations and their defenders vehemently deny these charges. They insist they are merely supporting brave local actors, empowering grassroots movements fighting for human rights and democratic freedoms. They claim they are on the side of the people, against oppressive regimes. But for many governments and citizens in Africa and beyond, the perception is starkly different. They see a powerful, unaccountable foreign entity, meddling brazenly in their sovereign internal affairs, pushing a cultural and political agenda that often clashes violently with local traditions and national priorities. The debate rages. Is Soros a champion of open societies or a shadowy architect of globalist conformity? Section 4. Soft Power's Sledgehammer, the True Price of Progress. This entire strategy hinges on a concept beloved by international relations theorists: soft power. The ability to achieve your geopolitical goals not through military might or economic coercion, hard power, but through attraction, persuasion, the subtle shaping of desires and preferences. And what better vehicle for projecting soft power than a non-governmental organization? NGOs by their very nature arrive cloaked in an aura of compassion, of selflessness. This makes their influence far more palatable, far more insidious. less likely to trigger immediate defensive reactions than, say, a warship appearing on the horizon. But don't be fooled by the soft label. The consequences of this soft power can be incredibly hard, devastating even. When Western-funded NGOs aggressively promote specific social values or political models, these can and often do clash violently with deeply ingrained local cultures, traditions, and societal norms. This imported progress can sow division. It can fuel social friction. It can destabilize communities in the name of liberating them. Furthermore, externally funded NGOs, with their comparatively vast resources and international connections, can easily overshadow and undermine local indigenous civil society efforts, creating parallel power structures beholden not to the local populace, but to distant foreign donors. Let's be brutally honest about the ultimate objective. This isn't just about making the world a better place, one democracy promotion workshop at a time. It's often about creating compliant states, nations that will reliably align with the economic and geopolitical interests of the donor countries. Think about it, opening up markets for Western corporations, granting preferential access to vital natural resources, voting in lockstep at the United Nations, the progress being offered, the development being funded, frequently comes with these unstated yet firmly understood conditions. The aid is the bait, the long-term strategic alignment is the prize. So we return to the core, chilling question that haunts this entire discussion. Is this truly humanitarian aid? Is this genuine, selfless assistance offered with no ulterior motives? Or is it something far more calculated? A sophisticated 21st century iteration of colonialism wrapped in the comforting rhetoric of compassion and progress. The dark truth, it seems, is that the line between the two is often deliberately blurred to the point of invisibility. The benevolent mask of the NGO can, and often does, conceal the cold, hard face of foreign policy ambition. And it is African nations, once again, who are left to count the devastating cost and to wonder who, exactly, is truly being saved. Section 1. The verdict on benevolence. A facade crumbles. The gleaming armor of the non-governmental organization once presented to the world as the untarnished epitome of selfless aid, now lies fractured, perhaps irreparably so. We have journeyed far beyond the meticulously curated press releases, past the artfully constructed images of unwavering saintly compassion that dominate their fundraising campaigns. What we have systematically uncovered is not merely a series of unfortunate, isolated missteps. Instead, a profoundly disturbing, almost systemic pattern has unmistakably emerged. The carefully maintained mask of pure, unadulterated benevolence has begun to irrevocably crumble. This is a stark realization, compelling a fundamental re-evaluation of whom we trust when disaster strikes. The accusations leveled against certain NGOs have been relentless, echoing with increasing volume and urgency. We have meticulously documented the damning claims NGOs allegedly caught funding rebel factions. We've examined allegations of espionage where humanitarian missions serve as cover for intelligence operations. For some powerful players, war itself is a grim business model to be carefully sustained. Why this sudden wave of governmental shutdowns and severe operational restrictions targeting NGOs? These African governments are not acting on mere irrational whim or baseless paranoia. They are reacting to what they perceive as tangible, undeniable, and escalating existential threats. They see their national sovereignty being systematically eroded and their stability undermined. From Nigeria to Burkina Faso, Sudan to Ethiopia, the message is consistent. Foreign interference will no longer be tolerated. These are calculated acts of national self-preservation, born from years of bitter experience. This situation forces us to confront a profound question. Is the architecture of international aid fundamentally flawed? Or worse, is it a sophisticated system of influence and control masquerading as charity? The concept of the external savior is now deeply tainted by undeclared ulterior motives and hidden agendas. The promise of salvation often comes with unspoken conditions and a steep price paid by vulnerable populations. Section 2. The uncomfortable calculus. Peace as a liability? Let us dare to return to that brutal, almost unspeakable question, the one that haunts the very foundations of the international aid industry. If an NGO's existence depends on war, famine, and instability, do they genuinely desire lasting peace? Consider the vast, multi-billion-dollar machinery of the global aid industry. What happens if conflicts end and stability takes root? Does peace become a silent threat to these organizations? The ultimate victims are the most vulnerable segments of society. The millions of displaced families and starving children. The communities shattered by endless cycles of war and deprivation. When humanitarian aid becomes a weapon, the promise of relief turns into a mockery. The desperate plea for help is answered with a conditional form of engagement. Section 3. Beyond the headlines, a disturbing silence. When African governments expel major NGOs, it signals a profound crisis. They believe these organizations pose a danger to their national interests. These actions stem from first-hand encounters and evidence. The mainstream media often simplifies these complex issues. This investigation challenges those assumptions. Consider that the official story might be a crafted fiction. This is the untold story. Who truly profits from the chaos and silence? The answers are out there for those who seek them.